run out of time for some of our items. But what we will do, depending on how progress we're making in the next 15 minutes on this issue, we will then take civil society's presentations, and then as well SAPS and IPIT. But I think in terms of DPCI policy guidelines, we maybe just take them to Tuesday next week. So we will maybe do that with the Secretariat. So the Secretariat must be quite concise next week, but we already received the presentation from the Secretariat. Thank you very much. So I think we'll just bump DPCI to Tuesday. But let's see how things develop. Yes, honourable members, we have had input from SAPS. We had various input from the floor, but we need to make progress and move forward. And depending on the discussions we're going to have now and the response, it will depend. It will determine to a large extent the rest of the morning and the way forward. So I'll ask members. I saw Honourable Bulabatsi, Honourable Kola Barnard, Honourable Groenewald, Mbele, and as well as Mabija and Mamula. And yes.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. As the ANC, we don't have a say in whether the National Commissioner stays or goes, because the matter is with the President. But what we are going to demand now is a withdrawal of the uncalled for statement by SAPS. And again, we are going to demand an apology to the President, who is still applying his mind to the Falan Commission findings. Thanks, Chair.
Honourable Kola Barnard.
Thank you, Chairperson. These provincial heads, I believe, have been led by the presence of their superior rank, their boss, the National Police Commissioner. In the ranked structure of the SAPS, one takes orders, and no matter what the orders are, you obey. I am sensing there are certain provincial commissioners who did not wish to sign the document. Now, these provincial commissioners, except the one from KZN, who's yet to answer to us for her utterances, have done as ordered by the National Police Commissioner. There's no question in my mind. She was at the meeting, and that was huge efforts were made to hide that fact from this committee here in Parliament. But she was there, and she oversaw the entire process. We have two options as a committee. Of course, we could call for the powers that be to suspend the heads that have flouted their oath. They ventured into a political realm which they swore not to, and of course the media officer with the non-existent rank who claims he put the statement out without his boss signing it off, even though obviously she agreed to it being sent out and she was in the meeting. Or we can call for the suspension of the accounting officer herself. She is the source of this entire issue. As Jackie Selebe, as Becky Kele were before that, they did exactly the same thing. It's a repeat of history here. And at the time, the provincial commissioners were not held responsible. They were not. They were obeying orders. The National Police Commissioner was held responsible. The current National Police Commissioner has used this method to prop up her position. She used it previously. She's used it again. There is no guarantee she will not continue to use this methods, and all others at her 72 billion rand disposal, she'll continue to do so. So the Democratic Alliance calls for the suspension of the National Police Commissioner pending the outcome of a full investigation into this unsavoury matter, and the determination by the President, as a result of the findings of the Marikana Commission, various disciplinary hearings and all the myriad issues as highlighted in our report last week. There was one provincial commissioner who already referred to the Commission of Inquiry. I don't think it has been declared yet by the President, but I think everyone in this room accepts it is coming. So I believe the National Police Commissioner has used the provincial commissioners as a trade union in her efforts to justify keeping her position. She must be removed from the position of influence, so this sort of behaviour cannot be repeated before a determination for her fitness for office is declared. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Groenewald.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus, I want to start by saying that, firstly, we support the proposal made by the ANC for a new statement. Secondly, Chairperson, I also want to say that I believe that the Provincial Commissioner's intention was not to undermine. And I say I believe it because I do think that the Provincial Commissioners were put in a position where they were actually conflicted. You know, it's sometimes like democracy. When three lions and a springbok sits around the table and they have to vote who they're going to eat lunch, I think they know what the result is going to be, because they are appointed by the National Commissioner. I also want to add, Chairperson, that the report of this committee be sent to the President on this issue, which can be handled in a process if he acts further to appoint a commission, that we also have what is happened today be known to the people who do further investigation. And especially, we will have to go and look at the minutes, and if it's necessary, even to the recordings of this meeting, especially when it comes to what General Mogela has said. For me, it was an intentional effort to mislead this committee, and further steps should be taken from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Groenewald. Honourable Mula.
Thank you, Chairperson. When I was listening to all the provincial heads, it seems as if they were doing a poem, because all of them, they were saying one thing. What we are asking here, there is that lady from the national who was saying hands off to the national commissioner, whom they are referring to, and where is that lady? I think, Chairperson, when we call the provincial commissioner of KZN next week, we must call that lady. I don't know her name, but they know her. She was saying hands off to the national commissioner, whom she was referring to. I want to ask them to go back to the media and apologize to the public. And they must apologize to us, because when they are talking here, they were saying we are not having the intention of doing this and that, whereas they didn't go to the minister first and to the minister and ask him, what are we going to do if things are like this? They just went to the media because they are now reporting to the media, not to the law. You undermine the president of the country. I don't know what informs you to do that. Please withdraw your statements, and each of you, provincial commissioners, I don't know what must I say to you. I don't know, because you are leading. If we are saying the people of South Africa must feel safe, how are they going to feel safe from you? Whereas you are not prioritizing your work, you are prioritizing an individual. What you are saying here, I just thought when you were talking, you were having a meeting yesterday. There was someone who was instructing you, saying that you must go and say you were not informed, or you were not. You don't apologize. Please apologize. You are accounting to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mapicha. And then, sorry, oh, you covered. Sorry, and then I'll come back to you.
It's just a top-up. All the provincial commissioners were reciting a poem, and it makes me believe that this was a coined-up response, so that all of you follow the theme. And why I say so is because the Limpopo provincial commissioner said that during the discussion of the statement, issuing of the statement, he was not in there. He had gone somewhere in Polokwane to do 1, 2, 3. But he's also following suit without understanding how the deliberations took place. So it means he's just taking the marching orders that we must talk like this. So it means there's no truth. Things are being cooked, and please don't cook the minutes and the scheduled meetings. We want them as original as they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson. I think we have been listening to their presentations. Also, I think we will have to convert this perhaps conflicted situation into positive. Let us look at the positive side of it. To say, Chairperson, it takes a wise man or a woman, a matured for that matter, to accept if you have done mistakes during your call of duty. One other thing, Chairperson, is that I would want to advise supporting what the ANC has proposed. The FF Plus supported the withdrawal of the statement, which is very genuine. To say, Chairperson, SAPS personnel are professional people. They are not elected people, and therefore they cannot persuade political agendas. They must move away from politics. There are those people who have dedicated themselves through their political parties to represent people politically. They are officials. They have got their responsibilities to carry out. From the presentation by General Stolle, who admittedly to say he understands the procedures and principles on how to report and all those things, but failing to accept to say on this day there were some issues which cropped in, and out of the emotions, because they wanted to respond to the media, and which was, for me, it was a mistake, because two things happened which are not correct. How do you have two mistakes becoming the right? Because you can't just ignore your protocol just because there is a statement which you want to respond to, ignoring your own way of doing things. I think it is proper that they withdraw themselves also from politics. And also, of course, apologize unconditionally to the President of the Republic of South Africa. Because humiliating that office by the people who are supposed to protect the citizenry, I think it is just uncalled for. Lastly, Chairperson, is that, sometimes we market ourselves very negatively to a point that if people attack us, we forget that it is us who created those loopholes. Because, you can't defend you can't have that solidarity support to issues that will implicate you as well. To an extent that you don't even care about your mandate. You care about the person who is leading you, even if that person is misleading you. So you will have to support almost everything. So Chairperson, I just wanted to indicate that this issue was discussed in that particular meeting where we were not there, out of emotions. Because I imagine if that media was there, I think that media would have been a runaway. They would have chased that media if that media was there. The manner in which this issue was brought to the discussion, because it was not part of the agenda. So we can't discuss emotional things in an official meeting to a point where you even release the statement, which does not inform by anything except the emotions. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Honourable Mabija, you're fine. Honourable Mbele?
I'm not fine.
Yes, first Honourable Mbele, and then I'll come back to you.
Sorry, Chair, I did change my mind. I mean, most of the substantive points have been covered. I think the only new inputs I want to make, just short and sweet, is going forward to recommend to the SAPS that a very useful principle would be to defend the institution, not individuals. Defend your performance, not people. And then we can avoid this mess ever coming up again.
I believe the commissioners, they are not a union. Therefore, I would like to indicate that there's a need for them to go back and apologize to Pop Crew, because they have stepped into the territory of the Pop Crew, because they have gone political.
Honourable Groenewald?
Chairperson, now I hear what my honourable colleague is proposing. I don't think I will go along with that one, because then we actually further politicize the issue. I don't think that's the route we should go. Thank you.
Right. The Honourable Deputy Minister, anything from your side at this stage?
It's so funny. We get her in the end. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Indeed, Chairperson, I would like to apologize on behalf of the Ministry of Police and also the leadership of the police. That is, all these things happened under our stewardship. I'm sure there won't be another time when something like this happened in the police. I've spoken to the management that maybe we should improve on the communication, because really it's true that if this statement was taken to us before it was released, we would have corrected some of those parts. And also looking at the timing when this statement was released is also problematic. Hence, I agree with you when you say that we must apologize to the president, we must apologize to the nation, because we started by preempting the president. When it comes, we don't know what route is the president going to take. Let's say, for instance, if there is a commission that is going to be appointed by the president, each and every person will be given an opportunity to go and make her or his presentation. I'm sure that we would have waited for that time, but I really would like the portfolio committee to forgive us for the wrong that we did. I understand that this was not the intention. Hence, I said to them, their statement should have been very short. After reading the newspaper and hear about all the allegations, they should have said that we are not part of that, of the people who don't support the National Commission and end there. Because the problem is when then they mention other things that are unnecessary, which made now the statement to look the way it looked for that media briefing. So I think that's all that I would say on behalf of myself and the Minister of Police. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Yeah, thank you, honourable members of the committee, for your input as well as the input from SAPS. Now, I think the first issue that we also raised this morning is the constitutional point. And it's a pity that that didn't come through from the responses we received from SAPS. I think that also highlights the need that the recommendations of the National Planning Commission must be implemented as soon as possible in terms of the renewal of the SAPS. That is critical. And also the issue of leadership, the appointment process, that's critical. Because going to the process of the White Paper and the new SAPS Act, we will need a leadership that understands the distinction between civilian and executive authority. What is exactly the role of the police members to play? And I want to quote from a document that was submitted on the 15th of June 1995 at the Constitutional Assembly, where that was the input from the from the ANC, where it said that the final responsibility for security should be taken out of the hands of the security apparatus. Final responsibility for security should be placed squarely in the jurisdiction of the democratically elected parliament and executive. The security services are to be bound explicitly. Civilian control over the security services at ministerial level and through other mechanisms should be constitutionally enshrined. The right of the public to access information must be provided for constitutionally with limitations in the interest of national security. Security institutions should not act on their own authority, but under the guidance of Parliament and the Executive. Now, that was the submission that informed their proposal in terms of the final constitution. And I think that is the principle still at play. There must be civilian control. There shouldn't be a blurring of roles. And we heard now the version in terms of the statements that was produced or compiled on the 16th of July. But that statement was only issued 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later. So if there was an urgency with regard to the matter, why wasn't it issued after that meeting? It was waited just the night before the submissions was have to made to the presidency regarding the Marikana report. So that is very, very problematic and unfortunate. I think also we will, before we come to the recommendations, I think it's important next Tuesday that the Provincial Commissioner of KZN appears before the committee. We also need the Divisional Commissioner for HRD, General Etsia, to come to this committee to explain his statement that was published. And then the principle of submitting all these statements countrywide. Because I can tell you, in the reaction I had from members and my office as well, from other police, senior officials, countrywide, in all the provinces, and at Waghuis, what are they saying about this? And I'm not going to make that known or publish that, but there's different views. And we must ensure that there's one SAPS that speaks with one voice. And the SAPS is bigger than people. People come and go. You will have divisional commissioners, provincial commissioners, national commissioners. They will come and go. But the founding principle is the Constitution, the SAPS Act. And the focus must be on core business. The problem is if there's a fight in a bureaucracy, usually they will take side with the incumbents. Some won't. Some will wait. Some will wait for new processes or the new incumbent. The problem is you become then engulfed in an internal battle and you don't focus on your core business, and that's the fighting of crime. That is the fighting of crime. I mean, last week we had a presentation by Institute of Security Studies. Armed robberies are up. We have seen the tragic killing of police officers, 7 in this last week and a half. Tragic. That is the core issues that we must address. We must, and there's been successes, but I think that is the energy should go into that. Why don't we leave processes that is in the hand of the executive? The president has instituted, or he appointed the Farnham Commission. The president. And the due process must be followed. And the mere fact that that statement was only released 2 weeks after the Maguba Sloof meeting is an indication that it's not only just to clarify. Because if you wanted to clarify, members, why didn't you release it that evening? You waited 2 weeks. So in terms of your own version, if you wanted to clarify members and so on, you waited 2 weeks. So that's also bad management. The principle is if a DG is attacked in government, it's up to the spokesperson to respond, and that's that. That's that. You don't see in other government departments where there's processes regarding the DG, when the DG is suspended, that you have now the DDGs and chief directors issuing statements in support. You don't have provincial directors of government departments saying hands off the DG. Really, that is what you expect at university campuses or at high school, but really not in a professional organization. So I think if we want to achieve the goals of the white paper and the NDP, a professional police force that will be trusted by the community, we must go back to basics. We must go back to basics, do our job, leave the politics for the politicians, leave that process unfettered. Otherwise, we're going to have serious ruptures. And you've got your view, but you know the communication I received this last week and a half by telephone, fax, and email, and personally from your colleagues, and that's why we want to have a situation where that doesn't occur. You must respect the process announced by the president. We don't want to have any comments on that. So going forward, there was various proposals made. I heard Honourable Kola Barnard, but I think we must await the process announced by the president. So for the Portfolio Committee at this stage to ask for suspension, I think would also be procedurally not correct. We must give the presidency an opportunity to look at the representations of the National Commission and also receive legal advice. And of course, the president will then make up his mind and announce his decision to the nation, and we must respect that process. But I think that is critically at this stage, today, and I think that is the ANC's recommendation, FF and the DA hopefully will also can live with that, is 3 things. We want now here for all members to retract that statement. They must apologize to the Portfolio Committee, and they must also apologize to the presidency, to the president, and we must also have an undertaking that we will never have a repeat of such a process. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. General Sitole, I'll start with you and then we can go through the ranks.
Point of interruption. I just want to know if this thing is not working.
Yeah, I think let's get it on record. Let's. Yeah. General Sitole, you must join the DA across the floor.
Chair, thanks for the opportunity to allow me to join the honourable members for a moment. Chair, I wanted to say, after all our deliberations, we've got a minister in our presence, and she has summarized everything that we have spoken to. We have taken note of the direction that the Portfolio Committee has given us. And we respect that direction, but I won't say anything more beyond what the Minister has summarized. Thank you.
General Bekele.
Chairperson, Honorable Chairperson and members of the Portfolio Committee, the Honorable Minister, we regret, Honorable Chairperson, that the statement did what we never intended to do, and it will never happen again. Thank you.
Right, others? I'm very glad that the two generals associate them with a statement of the Portfolio Committee.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Deputy Minister, and Honorable members, on behalf of myself, I do withdraw the statement unconditionally. It turned out to have unintended consequences, and it shall not be repeated, and one learn from what has happened. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General, for that.
Honorable Chairperson, Deputy Minister, and honorable members, I would also like to sing the same tune like Deputy National Commissioner Stole, without reiterating what the Deputy Minister has already indicated. I align myself with the statement by the Deputy Minister, and on behalf of the province that I come from, I would also like to apologize to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
The Honourable Chairperson, I hereby indicate that I'm withdrawing from the board statement, and one owes the apology to this committee and to the State President. It will never happen.
Thank you, General. I think what is also important that SAPS must issue today a statement including all these issues that we raised, the 3 issues we raised from our side. Thank you.
Chairperson, I apologize to the committee, I apologize to the President of the country, and I commit that it will never happen again. Thank you.
The Honourable Chairperson, sorry, the Deputy Minister, honourable members, I, on behalf of Mpumalanga SAPS, do hereby apologize for the statement from the BOC and all the statements I issued pertaining to this. I apologize. I am apologizing here for what happened to the committee, to the President, and to the general community of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General.
Chairperson, the Deputy Minister, and honourable members, I align myself with the statement of the Minister and hereby unconditionally apologize to the State President and the country as a whole.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Minister, honourable members. On behalf of the Northwest, unconditionally in aligning myself with what the Minister, our Deputy Minister said, I want to say really we are recreating the message that people received out there. It was not intended to. And thank you very much, Chairperson, for this committee for guiding us and also reminding us as to what is our mandate in terms of what is it that we need to do. We really appreciate that as Northwest. To the President, the country as a whole, we really apologize.
Thank you, General.
Honorable Chair, Deputy Minister, and honorable members, on behalf of KZN Province, I wish to apologize to the President and to the country, and I wish to undertake to ensure that such confusion and information that is likely to result in unintended consequences doesn't happen again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Deputy Minister, honorable members, on behalf of, I want to subscribe to the statement issued by the Deputy Minister and also want to apologize to the Honorable President and to the committee.
All right. Is that all the provincial commissioners? Yeah. Thank you very much. Spokesperson?
The statement as issued was responding to the issues that were in the public domain. The statement, it is clear from the discussion this morning that it resulted in a huge misunderstanding and to the conclusion that the BOC had intended to undermine the processes and get involved in political issues. From that perspective, it is regrettable that such a statement was then issued. Thank you, Chair.
Just a moment. Honorable Mabija.
I should think I perceived him in a way that he slightly apologized. The first information you gave that you were doing 1, 2, 3 to the what is unacceptable when you are apologizing. Just do it right. Do the right thing. Repeat yourself correctly so. Delete the first part of your thing, please.
Honorable Karabarat, if it's short, I don't want to open a debate, but General, you've heard the memo.
Chairperson, Deputy Minister, and honorable members, I indeed heard, and the first part of my statement is deleted then.
Right. Right, that is fine. Thank you very much for that. It's then the end of the story for us in terms of this matter. We will just deal with the other two generals on Tuesday, but we appreciate the approach. We need a police service that's ascribed to the Constitution, that is subject to civilian control, and don't undermine any processes initiated by the President. That's critical. But, I mean, fighting crime is your core business, and I think that is the issues we want to hear. Next week, we've got going to get a briefing from you on 2 projects you are running, and that's what we want to hear, Phiyega as well as combat. So that is the focus. So let us respect other processes. So thank you, Deputy Minister, for coming. We appreciate it very much. Colleagues, what we're going to do now, because we've got very limited time, we're going to ask the civil society organizations to deal with the DVA report. We will see where we come. But I think the Secretariat and even the provincial commissioners will maybe have to reschedule that. But let's see how far we come. In terms of DPCI, we will also have to postpone that to maybe to next Tuesday, but that's how things are, unfortunately. But let's get civil society to come forward, and then we will start with the DVA presentation. Thank you. Right, thank you very much, honourable members. We will then start with the Legal Resources Centre. We'll just maybe ask the participants to introduce themselves, and then we will start.
Good.
Just want to know, is the presentation available on screen?
I had submitted one.
Right, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the chairperson, the honourable members of the Portfolio Committee, for allowing us the opportunity. My name is Charlene May. I'm an attorney. I work for an organisation called the Legal Resources Centre. We are a national public interest law clinic, and we're based in Cape Town, Gauteng, Durban, and in Grahamstown. I don't want to take up too much time because I think that we are running a bit late. So I want to just focus on some of the key issues in respect of the implementation of the Domestic Violence Act. I want to start off just by explaining where the Legal Resources Centre fits in respect of the implementation of the Act and the work that we do. We see primarily women, although we see some men, coming into our office reporting being victims or survivors of domestic violence. We assist in court representation. In other words, we represent victims of domestic violence in our domestic violence courts in attempts to try and obtain protection orders in terms of the DVA Act. We also do research, and we occasionally come before the various portfolio committees when they deal with the implementation of the Act or when there are issues around law reform.
And that's where we got to leave it. That was the National Board of Police Commissioners sitting before the Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Police, apologising to the President, to the State President, as well as to the nation about that statement where they backed the National Police Commissioner, Riah Phiyega. Let's take a break.
Us, their experiences are in the implementation of the Act. And then I'm also going to touch on what SAPS members themselves have said to us in respect of training exercises that we've undertaken over the past 2 years with SAPS members. I want to highlight that we have not done training on the Act itself, but that we have done training on issues around gender sensitivity and issues around cultural awareness as part of various facets of the implementation of the Act. So very quickly, one of the main issues, of course, where SAPS is responsible for the implementation of the Act relates to the National Commissioner and the issuing of national instructions in terms of the Act. Previously, and I think that the Honourable Chair had made reference to the ICD, and that the ICD had reporting requirements in respect of the Act up until about March 2012. Currently, that reporting requirement rests with the Civilian Secretariat for Police, and that they are to come before Parliament and report on the number and the particulars of matters that are reported to them in respect of non-compliance with the Act, as well as to make recommendations. So just touching on some of the responsibilities so that it doesn't feel as if I'm talking in the air. Some of the responsibilities that SAPS has in terms of the national instructions include that without delay, SAPS members shall ensure that a police vehicle is dispatched to attend to a complainant, that members must inform complainants on their rights and remedies, They must hand complainant a notice and explain its content. Where a complainant wants to lay criminal charges, they must be assisted to do so. Members must assist the complainant to obtain treatment and suitable shelter, and members may accompany the complainant to collect personal belongings from her home. Once an interim order has been obtained, members must serve the interim order on the respondent without delay, as it is only valid to the respondent once it has been so served. So that is not a closed list of the national instructions, but it's just to touch on some of the key areas or obligations that members have. I want to move on to issues of non-compliance with those national instructions and some of the issues of misconduct that the clients themselves have reported to us, but that have also been shared with this committee, I think, over the past 15 years around non-compliance. So there's been failure to arrest the abuser of an offence where an offence of violence has been committed, failure to arrest in cases where a warrant to arrest has been issued, failure to dispatch a vehicle to a domestic violence incident, failure to inform victims of counselling, medical or shelter services, failure to keep record of protection orders on file, failure to note incidents of domestic violence in the domestic violence register, failure to take witness statements, failure to open a docket and refer matters for prosecution, failure to provide J88 medical forms to victims in cases of physical injury, failure to act in cases where there is no interim protection order, and incorrect advice that is given to complainants. I want to touch on some of the findings that we've had in respect of the training that we've conducted over the past 2 years. So participation in training over the past 2 years has primarily taken place during Women's Month, and it has allowed us as the Legal Resources Centre a unique engagement opportunity with SAPS members who are required to implement the Act. And so some of the things that I'm going to say to you now are some of the things that SAPS members themselves have shared with us. That there's no clear lines of communication between the police on the one hand and the other relevant government departments that are tasked to implement the Act. Clerks at the court don't know what the roles of SAPS is under the Act, and SAPS members have no engagement with the Department of Social Development, so they do not know where to refer clients to in cases of counselling or cases where shelter is needed. Survivors of domestic violence were stereotyped based on members' own personal perceptions and prejudice. Some members did not have a basic understanding of when domestic violence constituted a crime. And some of the indications of that was that a member had raised the issue of, thought that it was only once there was a protection order in place that a member could actually act, or was required to act. Members did not receive training on appreciating the cycle of gender-based violence or the psyche of a victim of domestic violence. So they expressed much frustration and reluctance to assist as women do not see cases through. They conceded that this frustrated them on a personal level. One of the anecdotes from that particular session was a SAPS member who said he felt that SAPS should have the power to continue with cases even where complainants felt that they wanted to withdraw proceedings because they had just become so frustrated in trying to do their jobs. There was identified prejudice against asylum seekers and refugees and general notion that they are illegal. They conceded that it was difficult for them when they were assisting victims of domestic violence, where it was cases of asylum seekers or refugees where people didn't have valid documentation. Specifically, then SAPS members felt that their first obligation was to arrest the person for being in the country unlawfully or illegally, and then not being able to deal with the issue of the domestic violence. members didn't feel that it was their duty to serve documents for court purposes. And I must say that this was one of the most controversial issues that was discussed over the last 2 years of training, and it kept on propping up, that members felt that the duty to serve documents should rest on, would be a Department of Justice function and something that the sheriffs would have to do. Of course, it is a function that the sheriff does, but then individual clients have to be able to pay the sheriff's fees. So that becomes difficult when complainants don't have the funds available to do so. But of course, this might have been an indication of why process and service of interim protection orders in fact don't happen on a timeous basis, or that they don't happen at all. Members raised the issue that domestic violence officers within stations were normally either female or of a lower rank. This impacted on their ability to hold senior members accountable in cases of misconduct. Access to vehicles was sometimes a problem in areas that have high rates of serious or violent crimes, and domestic violence is moved down on the priority list. If I move on to some of our clients' experiences over the past probably about 5 years that we've been running the project. Just to say again that we provide legal representation in cases where women have experienced difficulty in obtaining protection orders, and these are some of the experience that women have shared with us in respect of their engagements with SAPS. Clients are advised that until they obtain a protection order, the police cannot accept charges against perpetrators. Even where a protection order is in place, members will attend a scene, mediate a resolution, and very often subject the complainant to secondary victimization. There's a delay in serving interim protection orders on the respondent, which puts the complainant in a vulnerable position. This, especially for us as lawyers, is a great frustration. You go to court in the morning, the interim protection order is issued. Our client is expected to go back into that household where she has obtained a protection order against her abuser. She's too afraid to tell him that she has obtained the protection order, and she sits there anxiously for the entire day waiting. Sometimes she waits 2 to 3 days before the interim order is served on him. Interim protection orders are served in the middle of the night, which disrupts households and once again leaves the complainant open to further abuse once the police has left. We want to touch on some of the recommendations. One of our key recommendations is a review on whether or not the national instruction should be improved upon. Since the inception, there's been implementation challenges, and perhaps we need to review and see where the instructions themselves need to be improved upon. Do we need to add additional things for SAPS members to do? Do we need to take away some of them? Or do we need to actually change the wording of the document so that it now conforms to what I almost want to say modern technology can provide for us? Improve training and understanding and how to engage with victims of domestic violence. Language and cultural barriers exist, and training addressing cultural barriers should address this as well as resource allocation. There's a need to rebuild the trust relationship with women in communities so that they feel that SAPS members will in fact protect them. There's a need to develop flowcharts within jurisdictions so that the line of communication, roles and responsibilities of role players are clear to everyone, not just SAPS members. A clear example of the need to develop those flowcharts probably relate to women coming in and is in need of psychosocial support or shelters, so that SAPS can understand what the role of the Department of Social Development is, but that members of the public also understands who the role players within their communities are and where they can go to for assistance. We need to ensure that there are safe spaces at all police stations so that women have safe environments and that areas are staffed with qualified counsellors. Very often the counsellors that are available are volunteers from the community, and therefore they are not necessarily always available on a 24/7 basis. More domestic violence officers need to be appointed so that when someone is off duty or on leave, the domestic violence matters can be dealt with adequately. I know some time ago, probably a year ago, when we tried to do a survey of domestic violence and its implementation at police stations in the Western Cape, the majority answer that we got during November, December was that the domestic violence officer was unavailable because they were either out for training or the domestic violence officer was on leave. And in some cases, it was highlighted that the domestic violence officer is also the person arranging the Christmas party. Senior members are appointed to be domestic violence officers so that it can be dealt with as a serious crime and hold members accountable. That better support should be provided from station commanders in respect of domestic violence matters. I want to end there because I think that the Women's Legal Centre is also coming to do a presentation. I want to thank the Portfolio Committee for the opportunity of having invited us to come and speak. I want to, as a last note, say that it's welcomed that the Portfolio Committee is willing to engage and that SAPS is willing to engage with civil society around issues of domestic violence or issues of gender-based violence. It's not something that we can do alone as individuals. And it's reassuring to civil society that the Portfolio Committee is taking its role and responsibility seriously in respect of accountability. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. The next presenters, you are welcome.
Good morning, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members. While it's still morning, we've got 4 more minutes of morning. My name is Sanya Bornman. I'm an attorney at the Women's Legal Centre and I specialise in gender-based violence at the centre. The Women's Legal Centre functions in much the same way as the Legal Resources Centre, the only difference being that the Women's Legal Centre serves exclusively female members of the public and female clients. Our main game is constitutional and impact litigation. And in the context of domestic violence as well as sexual violence and gender-based violence in general, our main concern at the moment is the systemic flaws that we pick up through the free legal advice office that we have. We have satellite offices in Johannesburg and in Khayelitsha, as well as our Cape Town office in Adderley Street. And through these service points, we're approached by members of the public that indicate to us much the same problems that Ms. May has just outlined. As being the experience also of the LRC attorneys dealing with domestic violence. So we won't repeat what Ms. May has just presented to you. Instead, I would like to address you on some of the concerns that we raised in a letter that we addressed to you on the 11th of June this year. That letter was jointly addressed to yourselves by the Women's Legal Centre and Ms. Lisa Vetten, who is sitting next to me, and I'm very pleased to be sharing the space with her today. So briefly, the letter spoke about the Civilian Secretariat of Police's implementation report, which was before you in May. And the letter was prompted by some of the concerns that you yourselves identified in that particular report. We picked up on the issue of legal and policy reference to the Civilian Secretariat for Police, and Ms. Vetten will elaborate on that a little bit in a moment, as well as the statutory reporting obligations of the National Police Commissioner, and then the information contained in the report itself, the detailed sort of station-level information we'd like to speak about briefly. And then we'd also like to alert you to some important related legal and policy developments that are ongoing at the moment, where we believe domestic violence should be a crucial consideration that should be kept in mind as these policies and laws come before you. Some individual concerns, in addition to what Ms. May has outlined already. We are concerned to be seeing ongoing civil litigation against the South African Police Service related to service delivery. And I shan't go into the details of these particular matters, but suffice to say there is civil action being taken against the police on an ongoing basis. And the matters that gave rise to this civil litigation, the causes of action, are very much related to what Ms. May has outlined, and we are concerned that these things don't seem to be shifting. We speak about them year in and year out, and the problems seem to be persistent. And so we're starting to investigate what the underlying causes might be. What are the systemic causes of this sort of stubborn tendency of some of these problems in service delivery to persist? Another issue that we would like to address with you today is the 147 cases outlined in the CSP's report of domestic violence perpetrated by SAPS officers themselves, reported at 74 different stations. And here, in respect of the report, what we are concerned about is transparency and accountability in respect of the disciplinary processes that are taken, the disciplinary processes that are followed when these kinds of cases come up. The shooting by Constable Ronnie Marcy of 4 people at the Alexandra police station, we believe, especially underscores the need also to pay particular attention to the use and control of firearms, both by the general public and by SAPS officers, by SAPS members. And we think that there are some upcoming legislative and policy processes that can be very useful in addressing these kinds of incidents and preventing them from happening in future. I'm now going to hand you over to Ms. Vetten to discuss some of these underlying and persistent problems.
Thank you. And in doing so, what I'm going to be doing is drawing... Yeah.
Chairperson, do we have that the document?
It's not the same.
We don't have.
I think this one wasn't submitted, but we will arrange that it will be distributed. Yeah. Thank you. Ms. Vetten, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. What I really want to focus on is some of the themes that are emerging from about 12 years' worth of research now looking at the Domestic Violence Act, because I think we know what the problems are. We repeat them. I see we have someone here from the ICD who will say that these are the same problems they've been reporting on as well. So you want to look really, I think, at where there might be problems in law and policy where potentially the committee could intervene. So I think we've gone through the obligations already. I think the first issue that we want to raise is that the police's submission to Parliament of their 6-monthly report is extremely erratic. We see nothing until 2006. We see something submitted in 2007. We see nothing again until about 2011. Then we've seen nothing again since 2013. And although the Civilian Secretariat and before them the ICD was very consistent, that reporting is not happening consistently. So I think that is something that the committee needs to attend to. And what we would also want to suggest in that regard is, having looked at some of the reports that the police have submitted over the years, is that it might be worth the committee setting out a template as to what should be in those reports on a routine basis, which can then be assessed what progress is happening against the previous 6 months report. I think one of the areas where we are identifying some problems has been in the shift from the ICD and their oversight of the Domestic Violence Act to the Civilian Secretariat for Police. And I think one of the issues at the time we looked at this in June, I don't know if the police have corrected it since, was that the national instructions still made reference to the ICD. They had yet to reflect the change to the Civilian Secretariat of Police. And what was happening was that at provincial level, when the Civilian Secretariat of Police was asking some provinces for cooperation around oversight, they were not getting that, on the basis that the legislation said ICD and they were CSP, and so they were not going to assist them. So I think that needs to be altered as a matter of priority. We understood that the CSP had attempted to do this more than a year ago, and at the time there was a reference group meeting. The police had still not apparently signed off on that documentation. They have done so now. I think the other real concern is that the shift from ICD to CSP means that an independent avenue of complaint has been lost to members of the public. Previously, if people were unhappy with how they'd been treated by the police, they could either go to the station or they could go to the provincial office of the ICD. That they can't do any longer. They must now only go back to the station commissioner where whatever happened, happened. And I think in many instances, people are not going to want to go back and complain to the same people who treated them badly in the first place. So I think there needs to be some attention paid to where now do people go if they want an independent investigation. It's very difficult for them to go to the national office of the CSP, and it wouldn't appear as if all the provinces are able to take up complaints either or have the capacity. And you can just see the effect this has had on complaints. If you look in the last year of the ICD's functioning, there were 94 reports made to them by members of the public. If you look in the first year of the CSP's reporting, and these were reports that the CSP themselves identified, they weren't sent to them, they identified 22. So it's a 77% decline. So you can see the very real impact of removing that independent complaint mechanism. It also means it's very hard for us to track when people are making complaints against the police, because the police are quite clearly not forwarding those complaints to the CSP. Just some more recent data of that 1 6-month period, there were roughly 50 complaints by the National Office on the Domestic Violence Act. The only reason the CSP was able to identify those was by actually going through disciplinary registers at police stations, not because these had been necessarily submitted to them by the stations. And I also want to, I think, comment that on average, only 3 provinces are actually forwarding complaints to the CSP. The majority are not. And again, I think that seems to be because of because of some silences in the legislation. And I think just to compare, the SAPS over a 15-month period report that they had 280 domestic violence-related complaints. If you compare that, the CSP in 6 months collected roughly 50. So quite clearly, there's a very significant number of complaints that are not being brought to the CSP's attention, which means they cannot track them, they cannot see what improvements need to be made, and they cannot identify where the weaknesses are. I think the other challenge, if we look at monitoring, is that in many ways what it's becoming is a way of taking an inventory or a catalogue of police inadequacy. And that's not really sufficient. I think the important thing is to look at what are the consequences. What we would, I think, really like to see is that we shift from a position where at this point in time provincial commissioners are measured on their capacity to reduce particular categories of crime, the reports of that actually they start to be measured on the quality of their adherence to the Domestic Violence Act. And where their stations are not adhering, that should be a mark, no, there should be no performance bonus. But there should be some kind of way of holding stations responsible. You know, we're recommending possibly a position of within every 90 days of a station receiving a report, they must report as to what they have done in order to take the necessary steps to have altered and corrected the situation identified at the station. So I think that whole question of the consequences for not complying is not clear. And I think it does turn the Domestic Violence Act into an exercise in making complaints but not being able to do anything. I think the other question is that, and you'll see it in the next slide, is that the Civilian Secretariat is a national office which doesn't have clear lines of instruction and authority over the provincial offices of safety and security. And so what you can see is very significant discrepancies in what is being monitored in each province. And I think it raises questions over the extent to which possibly you as the Police Portfolio Committee need to involve the National Council of Provinces who do exercise authority over those provincial offices. Just to give you the example of Limpopo with 96 stations, in that period of a year, they managed to monitor exactly 7 of their 96. So 7% of their stations' provinces. The best performer is clearly Gauteng, which had managed to monitor close to 80% of the province's stations. But there's very significant discrepancies in the other provinces, which means I think that very uneven qualities of monitoring is going on. Can we go back to the previous slide? So I think that's a clear question that needs to be looked at. Whether or not this is true, one doesn't know, but when asking the provinces why they aren't monitoring, they're saying that it's an unfunded mandate and that they don't have the funds to go out and do monitoring. Whether or not that's correct, I don't know, but that's something the committee should look at. And I think then just the last point, that adherence to the prescripts of the Domestic Violence actually needs to become part of police performance, both at station level and at provincial level, and the necessary consequences should flow from an administrative point of view when there isn't that adherence.
Then we'd just like to briefly draw your attention to some parallel legislative and policy developments that are currently ongoing, and some of them are before you at this point in time. And we believe that these processes have a bearing on domestic violence and how it is policed. And therefore, it's very important that domestic violence be considered in the process of looking at these laws and policies that are before you, and in the process of refining them and getting them ready for finalization and promulgation. First of all, there is the Civilian Secretariat of Police's brand new policy on reducing the barriers to reporting gender-based violence. We believe that this policy could be a game changer. It's quite unique in the sense that it tries to move away from reporting on sort of the quantity of things, for example, the number of training initiatives or the number of arrests made or the number of reports received, and moves more towards that capturing of what the quality of those things are, the quality of policing. And I think that that's important also then to highlight success stories and good practices, because I think currently those are being lost in the manner in which reporting is being done. And there are police officers who do an excellent job, of course, in addition to the problematic aspects. There is, of course, also the white paper on police and the white paper on safety and security. These papers are before the committee at this particular time, and we are slightly concerned at the approach to gender-based violence of these papers and policies as they currently are drafted. Some concerns were raised by APCOF in the meeting that they held with yourselves last week, and we would like to just add our voice in the same vein. It's really for us about the mention of gender-based violence, whether it is prioritized in these papers, and how it is really integrated into the transformation of the police service, and to what extent it is being considered as a priority point, and to what extent there is a consciousness of really what kind of shifts need to take place in order to improve performance in these areas. Then there is the Firearms Control Amendment Bill, again specifically in the context of domestic violence and gender-based violence in general. There is a possibility, I think, with this piece of legislation to avoid a lot of tragedy and to avoid especially intimate partner femicide, as well as intimate partner femicide suicide, as we saw at the Alexandra police station and other cases that have been in the media of late. And so we need to be critically engaging with the question of whether the current approach to how firearms and domestic violence relate to each other, is that approach that we have in the Firearms Control Act currently is working. And if it's not working, what do we need to do to change it and to make it more efficient and more effective?
I think just in conclusion is to look at some final recommendations. I think one of the things that we would want to recommend for consideration to the police, and I think this was prompted both by the Marcy killing, but you also saw the Scaper case that was referred to, where in that particular matter there were 9 attempts which are documented by the police to act on a protection order, which didn't happen and resulted in one of the women in that household being burnt to death. So on that basis, we would like to suggest that the police and the Civilian Secretariat consider establishing an independent panel to review all homicides involving a protection order. Because sometimes it's not the woman who's killed, it's the children in the household who are killed instead. So we'd like to see an independent review panel comprising SAPS, comprising CSP, and comprising independent experts from domestic violence organizations who should review every single case where a woman or a child dies and there was a protection order. We don't have more recent data, but in 2009 we could see that 5%, or 1 in every 20 of the women who were killed that year by her intimate partner, died being in possession of a protection order. And we need to understand if the death could have been prevented and was as a result of police negligence, or whether there's a category of victim who is at particular risk and who needs particular kinds of protection to be put in place. And we need to understand that better. There's already a child homicide review panel, so I think if you were to consider something like that, it would not necessarily be a shockingly strange and unusual policy intervention. We would also add to this, I think, an investigation for this panel is to also look at cases where police officers kill their female partners. That should also fall within the purview of this particular panel. I think we've spoken a little bit about the need to look at the new CSP policy and its approach to quality of services. The other thing it also talks to is the need to develop some kind of supporting policy framework for domestic violence, and it came up in the LRC presentation. At this point, the only government department with a legal obligation to deal with domestic violence and who is available on a 24/7 basis is the police. So we have no obligations on the Department of Social Development to provide shelters, to provide funding to organizations. We have no obligations on Department of Health to take any kind of statutory intervention. We also note that the Domestic Violence Act makes very clear that the courts can pay for sheriff's fees if they put a means test in place. The Department of Justice has never gotten round to actually putting that means test in place. So I think there's a need to start looking at what is it that the other departments are doing and not doing in order to support the police's implementation of the Act, and that we need to have a comprehensive policy framework to support the policing of domestic violence, which also needs to take into account some of these new innovations that the police are introducing. For instance, a domestic violence officer is not part of the legislation or policy at this point of view. So there needs to be some sort of decision that if the police are going to do that, that's now put into policy so that it can be accurately assessed and measured and reported on. Because I think at the end of the day, monitoring and review is not just about punishment. It's also about learning. What are people doing that's making a difference and that is working well?
Another recommendation we'd like to make is around the Khayelitsha Commission's report. We understand and appreciate that the Khayelitsha Commission and its report might be controversial to some, but we do feel that the investigation that was done with regards to the Domestic Violence Act and its implementation and compliance with the Act did yield some very valuable recommendations. The Women's Legal Centre, together with Ms. Vetten, led some evidence before that particular commission, and we had sight of some of the documents supplied by the South African Police Service at the time. And we have also similarly had sight of the recommendations, and we think that they are worth your consideration, and they are definitely worth implementing, not just in the context of Khayelitsha, but perhaps nationally. And then a next recommendation, to make it easier to, I think, get some consistent and timeless reporting in terms of the Domestic Violence Act, and to get compliance with that legal mandate to report on how the Act is being implemented. We think that it could well be appropriate for the committee to include reporting in terms of Section 18 of the DVA as a standing item on your agenda, so that it is something that comes up every year, and it is something that is never really allowed then to fall by the wayside. And similarly, we really welcome the opportunity to be able to participate and to be able to comment on these kinds of reports. And we believe that civil society can continue to augment the capacity of the committee in terms of providing useful and valuable information about what is happening on the ground, what clients are experiencing, and really trying to bring in the voice of victims and how we are seeing these implementation plans and programs being rolled out in practice, and whether they are having a successful impact on domestic violence in South Africa. And so we really would welcome future calls for comment on Section 18 reports, and we stand ready to assist you and to work together with yourselves as well as the South African Police Services going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Members, I know there's a lot of issues been raised, but we sit with the problem. We must vacate the venue. But what we will do is that we continue with this session Tuesday at 10. Tuesday at 10, so we will, because SAPS has got a very substantial presentation, as well as Secretariat, as well as IPIT. So we'll have to interact. And I think there's a lot of questions. I don't know about the availability of the NGO. Maybe if they're Cape Town based, we don't want to put additional cost on you, but we will continue with this session then on Tuesday at 10, get the SAPS presentation next, then the Civilian Secretariat, and as well as IPIT, and then we'll go to the issues. Because I think the purpose also of this exercise is, and it's well illustrated in this presentation, is we must ensure that the weight of responsibility is not only with the Secretariat and SAPS. The other role players, the other government departments must come to the party. And I think that's going to be the important issue, and also maybe look at the legislation. And that's also, I think, also the amendment of the national instruction. So there's a lot of proposals that I think that we can positively use to deal with the issues that's been raised by the two presentations. So thank you very much to the civil society. Thank you very much to the SAPS provincial commissioners. We will then see you on Tuesday, and also to the Civilian Secretariat. Sorry that you're not getting a chance, and also to IPIT. But we'll continue then with the session on Tuesday. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.